How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
I just had an issue pop up.
Okay.
Is there something happening on? Is everything okay?
Yeah, wow, what's up? What do you see?
Oh, I don't know. I just saw something about picture in picture mode. Anyway, it's fine. I just
Oh.
X'd it. I just crossed it out. It'll be good.
Don't scare me. I'm like, is it an earthquake? No, I'm
No.
in California.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got a lot going
Yeah,
on.
yeah. No. Where are you calling in from?
Austin, Texas.
Austin. Oh.
Yeah. Can you tell from my very Texan accent?
I can't. I really can't. I mean, I know Texas has an accent for sure,
But
but
not this one.
yeah. All right, but honestly, thank you. Are you done moving? Were you personally moving, or was your company moving?
We were personally moving, so that's why
Okay.
we just have a right now the studio is looking like a blank wall because we have not
Yeah.
had time to
Yeah.
actually set it up.
I did mine as well, so I try to put a little blue light behind it, but like my
Yeah.
hindsight sign is over here. We'll be blank today. So let's get to it.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, it's so much clearer now.
What if the biggest challenge podcasters face isn't creating great content, but actually getting it in front of the right audience? Today's guest, Deirdre Tshien. How do I say it? Tshien?
Yeah, Shen, you nailed it.
I always play with the words. I'm just playing. Is the co-founder and the CEO of Capsho, the world's first AI-powered podcast copywriter, designed to help experts grow their listeners and build their movements. As a serial entrepreneur who has built multiple 6- and 7-figure businesses, go girl, she understands the struggle of standing out in a crowded market. In this episode, Deirdre shares her proven 4-step strategy to drive unlimited traffic. I hope you're going to share it. Unlimited traffic to your podcast and amplify your message like never before. Good morning. Is it still morning in Texas?
It's getting into the afternoon. I guess it depends on what your definition is of morning.
Yeah.
But we'll go with it.
I'll just say hello, good day.
Yeah, good day. That's right.
So how's everything going for you today? What's going on with you?
Oh, it's been amazing. The weather's been so good. We went on a really long walk with, we have a puppy and a little Australian shepherd, which we named Vegemite, of course. And so we went on a nice long walk, which really started the day off right. And it's been great since then.
So I'm in SoCal. I'm in Southern California where allegedly it never rains. But it is raining today. Every morning I go out and I walk my Shih Tzu in the morning, but he does not like the rain. So he's still patiently waiting for me to take him out. And I'm looking outside right now because I can see it. I'm like, is it going to stop raining at some time, right? So hopefully I can get out and get a walk as well. It's always good to start the day off like that. Absolutely.
It's amazing. Yeah. Gets the mind right.
Yeah. That's what I think. And I used to honestly take it for granted. There's so much free time, free mental time that you can utilize, strategically or however, purposefully. I won't say strategically. I won't make it a big thing, but you can use that time purposefully. And initially I wasn't. I'd be like, I don't feel like getting up. This is taking too long. All of these different things. But now, I thank my dog because he gives me, I probably wouldn't get up and go walking if it wasn't for him. So I'm very thankful in a sense.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about me, but now let's get back to you. Tell us just a little bit. This is hindsight, so you don't have to get too into depth or whatever. But if you could just tell us about, little baby Deirdre, right? And how you were coming up, some of the things that you learned along the way, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Where do I start? I mean, I guess one of the biggest things is by way of upbringing. I mean, I come from an Asian household. My parents are originally from Malaysia. I grew up in Sydney, Australia.
Mm.
But you know, just the way that I grew up and the expectations that my parents had kind of shaped me very early on in terms of ways of thinking and approaches. You know, I was always meant to be obviously an overachiever, study hard, get good grades, you know, become a doctor. That was like the path that I was on. And I'm very, very thankful to my parents for instilling a lot of really important, like values in me. But, you know, everything has a shadow side, I think. And with that, in hindsight, you know, if we talk about that now, it's like I was so on this linear path that
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really difficult to think about what anything else could look like. And even if I thought it, it was just so difficult to even imagine or think about what or how I could even break the mold, you know, like it was just not
Mm.
even, it just didn't seem possible. And so that kind of carried through. I didn't end up becoming a doctor because I realized I hated science. So I studied law instead, which was like the second compromise. But I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going into corporate. My first career in corporate was in banking. And,
Okay.
you know, it was through it. It was like every room that I was in, because I was always, I guess in a way, even if it was like subconsciously taught to like be seen, not heard, you know, to always like not to ask too many questions, not to,
Yeah.
you know, voice. Like I didn't have opinions, you know, because everything,
Mm-hmm.
because I was on a path. I'd always been on a path, and so the opinion came from like a textbook or you know a test that I was doing, or you know, or what my teacher told me, or you know, so everything. I just remember being in these rooms and being, you know, prodded almost to contribute, and I just
Mm.
always felt like nothing I had to say was of value, or that if I thought anything differently, in my mind, literally the conversation that I was having in my mind would be like, well, if this was a good enough thought, surely someone else would have said it already, you know, like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the thoughts that were going through my mind. So I battled with a lot of um, imposter syndrome and a lot of just like not feeling like I was enough to be
Mm-hmm.
heard, or take up space, I guess. And it's really hard. That's a really, really hard to get through, especially then when we talk about an entrepreneurship journey. Like even now, I
Yeah.
still battle with that, honestly. You know, I'll look at new markets and I'll be like, I am not, you know, either qualified or well or known enough, or I don't have enough experience in that particular market. Like, who am
Yeah.
I to go and speak to these people? So, yeah, that's some of the things. I don't know if that
That's
answer your question, Lee.
that's pretty cool. So two things. Two things. One, um, you said you grew up in Australia.
Yes.
So I hear the Australian accent a little bit and not the Texas. So that's one. And then
Yeah.
and then two, I tell you what, I feel that way. I think I felt that way. And I went in the military and I kind of got out of it because you kind of have to,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that imposter syndrome or, sitting there and being seen but not heard.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, even to this day, it brings me like an adrenaline rush when I ask you a question. You be like, "Oh, that was a good question," because I don't think it is a good question some of the times, right?
Yes.
And some
Yeah.
of the times I'm in a room and they be like, "Oh, that was a good question. I didn't think of that," and I was like, "Oh, I got one," you know.
Yes. Chalk that
so
one
so I
up.
yeah, I know. So I feel you on it, and I think even to yourself, you've overcome that. I'm believing, but it's still you. It's still
Mm-hmm.
in you because that's kind of your upbringing. And I'm putting words in your mouth, so you can either say yay or nay. Uh, but for someone who has navigated, and you can tell us about this, I'm gonna ask a question. You can tell me all the businesses that you navigated. Um, did your experience with imposter syndrome evolve over time, or did it show up differently with each venture? How did you deal with
Yeah,
those?
interesting. Yeah, it always shows up. I would say it shows up in different intensities and in
Mm-hmm.
different moments. Going first, and I don't know how. So our first venture, my husband and I, was in hospitality, which is probably, I would advise anyone that to not try that as your
That's
first
hard
venture.
one.
It's hard. It is incredibly hard. So this was back in 2013
Mm-hmm.
when we opened up a dessert bar in Sydney, in Australia. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, even though I say, like, again, everything about this podcast, it's hindsight, right? Like, I
Yeah.
look back at that time and I'm like, I don't know how we did it. I
Mm-hmm.
honestly don't, because I think it was like part naivety, part ignorance that like probably prompted us to just keep going. Like, if I
Yeah.
had known what I was getting into, we would have canned it. But with the
Yeah.
naivety and the ignorance, it was like we just kind of kept going. But I
Mm.
was honestly, talk about being an imposter, like feeling like an imposter. Like, we were negotiating rents with obviously people who were like way more experienced and way more ruthless than we are. Like, we were dealing with suppliers who, again, way more experienced, way more, like, we were just totally in over our heads. Like, and
Mm.
I don't know how we did it, but it was almost because I think I also have this innate, like, if we, for example, we sign a document, it's like we're going to fulfill our part, so it was almost in a way like counter to that. It was like, by signing rental, like a lease agreement to actually have a
Mm-hmm.
space, forced us to just keep going and make it work, if
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Exactly.
So yeah, so the imposters, so like that's where it first started. And even I remember one of the first, this was back in 2013. So when we still a big strategy, just looks very different now, but at that time, it was food bloggers were really the influencers of
Mm.
that space. And so
Okay.
I felt like a massive imposter, like reaching out to these food bloggers and inviting them into the dessert bar was called the Choc Pot. Because I was like, who in the world am I? And I was so grateful when people were so excited to come and try us out. And, it's just like each of these barriers that you just break down, you realize that
Yeah.
actually everyone either struggles with their own version of it, or it's kind of that same thing. If you don't ask, if you don't put yourself out there, like, you're never going to actually find the success on the other side of it. So
Yeah.
even though I do battle with it, it looks different, and the intensity is probably not as high, but just because I've done it so many times.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that I don't still feel it. Like, I still feel it every single day.
Yeah. I love that. So now it's another hindsight. If you could go back, right? If you can just go back and give advice to your younger self who was doubting her own success, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's a tough one, because I think for me, it's not that I don't know whether I ever doubted success as a concept. I just only ever doubted the path to success.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. So basically,
That does.
in my mind, I was like, I'm going to always be successful. I guess because that was part of my upbringing as well. It's like, well, if you're going to be a doctor, or if you're going to be in these high paying jobs, success is kind of like, that's the reason why, generally
Yeah.
Asian parents, definitely my parents, pushed me down a certain path, because for them it was like, well, you do this, you're going to be successful. Like, that was already a given. But I think that what changed for me over time was like, actually that path didn't work for me. So what is a path that I'm going to go on, and what's that going to look like? And is that actually going to bring me success? But I never doubted that I would get there in some way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair answer. Fair. All right. So let's talk about entrepreneurial. You built 7. What would you say it was called? The business Choc Pot?
The Choc Pot. Yeah. So we had
The
like
Choc
a
Pot.
that was our first venture. We grew that to 5 locations in Sydney.
Oh, nice.
We also had a burger restaurant alongside of that. So we had 2, it's called Stacks on Burgers. So we had 2 locations there. And then I had a like a fashion technology business that ultimately we failed that one. But that was something that another co-founder and I were exploring and looking to build. We had an agency that transitioned into an agency for e-commerce brands. We had a coaching business. And then now we're in software.
All right. So you've built and led 7 businesses across 5 industries. What sparked your entrepreneurial journey and how did it lead you to the podcasting space?
Yeah. So the entrepreneurial journey back in 2013, that was sparked honestly probably because I was just having a quarter life crisis. Like I was in corporate, it was in banking, and I just knew that this was not going to be the path for me. I was, I'm thankful and I'm grateful because even at that time I was in these rooms with, really high executives all the way to the CEO. Which gave me really good insight into kind of the type of person you do have to be to make it to the top, and just looking at that and watching, how you had to kind of like play the game. And so I was just like, I just do not want to do this. And so that kind of, I guess, first prompted me to be like, hey, well, if it's not going to be in corporate, which is again the safe path and the way to quote unquote success for that path, like what was it going to be? And at that time, my husband, or then boyfriend, he was actually studying medicine and he was hating it. He was miserable. And so we kind of like, we were thinking about, okay, well, what if we did do our own thing? What if like his parents actually had their own business. So I guess it was a little bit more natural for him. And yeah, basically it was like we were just both on this, in this bubble of, well, we know we kind of want to do something. We don't know yet what. We just had to like we just had to land the idea. And then once we did, we just went for it. So that was kind of like how we fell into entrepreneurship. And then in terms of podcasting, like, I went through the journey of, as I mentioned, we started in hospitality. We went into actually exploring a tech business, which led us into agency work, which led us into coaching. And it was actually in that coaching business that we started our first podcast. And the reason, and everything's a journey. It's every time we look back and you go, you can almost chart the paths of like how the next idea, et cetera, came about, because it's always something that you live. And at the time when we were podcasting, and I was like, okay, well, this seems ridiculous because we're trying to grow a business. We started a podcast to do that, but then counterintuitively, it's like you have to actually grow the podcast first. So I was like,
to grow, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to like market. Basically, we're trying to market our business and our podcast. And it was kind of through that process that I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do all of this. And that's actually how the first idea, like the first iteration of Capsho came about. This was back in end of 2021. And we worked on this idea for the next, 5-6 months, and we launched our beta of Capsho in June of 2022. So it literally, and Capsho literally is all about helping entrepreneurs who create content, like they have a podcast, or maybe they have a YouTube channel, or they just do training courses or webinars. It allows them to actually use that content to amplify their message even more. So create even more content off the back of that, so that you can actually effectively market, not just you can market your podcast, but really it's all about marketing your message.
Right.
And that's kind of what we, that's the path that we went down.
I tell you what, I was going to ask you, when did you realize that discoverability for podcasting is a major issue, right? But you lived it. You actually went through it, right? You had to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So that's really cool, instead of just looking and like, I bet this is a good idea or something to jump into. So when you were going through trying to market your business and your podcast, what was the biggest, because you started Capsho, so what was the biggest aha doing that probably struggle, at the time? If there is an aha that you had at that time.
Um, I think, I mean, I don't know whether this is specific to marketing a podcast. I wouldn't say so, because really this is just like marketing in general, but there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. Like this, like everyone will teach a strategy and it's like, this is the thing that's going to get you discovered, or it's going to get you 1 million views or listeners or whatever. And I do believe that any strategy works as long as you stick with it. And sticking with it actually means like day in, day out for a good 6 to 12 months, which sounds like a really long time, especially in this day and age, because like, honestly, if something doesn't work for me in 2 days, I'm like, I'm out. That's how I feel. And so it's really, really hard, I think, to kind of come into this space with all of the best intentions and all of the grandiose visions that, we might have, and then be, kind of slapped with reality to be like, well, it actually takes time to grow a podcast. Yeah. It takes time to grow a YouTube channel. It takes time to grow a business, because they're literally something that would have worked and like skyrocketed like someone to success, maybe even in a couple of days, will not yield the same results for you. Like it's just not possible.
Exactly. I laughed when you said that, because I was thinking about all of the parenting guides and books and stuff, and they have all kind of great advice, and they're things that work, right? But people are different. Your kid's going to be a little different. Your environment's going to be a little different, right? So these things that people swear by may not work with this person's kid.
Yes.
So it's same thing with podcasting. It's a lot of overlay themes throughout life where that's true. I like the 12 months, just sticking to it and trying to dig in and figure it out. I also like the 2 days. So, because I feel you on that, because you can get instant feedback on a lot of things these days, right? So I definitely appreciate your perspective on that one. But so go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I said that kind of tongue in cheek because, nothing works in 2 days. So, but that's just,
Oh, I know. No,
that's how we feel though, right? Like it's like, if something doesn't work in 2 days, all right, we're on to the next thing. That's actually what doesn't work, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't. Because you'll give me all the insight, but me being in supply chain, because that's my normal thing. I mean, you got to look at trends, the analytics. You got to look at all of the things and figure out, okay, well, this worked and this didn't. But I'm gonna let you're the expert, right? You're like, you were talking about the CEOs and you were in the room, right? And you're like, oh, why am I here? I need to be quiet. That's how I feel when I'm talking to you right now. So,
oh no, definitely don't.
In this space, right? Because you've done all the work, you've done the research. But Capsho, it helps podcasters amplify their voice. But many, and this is back to this like what is it called? Imposter syndrome. Many struggle with feeling worthy of even being heard. I know I do. They're like, why would someone want to listen to this podcast? And what advice do you give to podcasters and experts who doubt their message?
Oh, yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, especially having gone through this process and being in that same, like I've been in those shoes where I've 100% been like, why would anyone listen to this? Like, what do I have to say that, that would actually help people? But the thing, like, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to a few things. Like, yes, it comes down to the experience that we have and, the stories that we tell, but it also comes down to like that we're all, and going back to what you were saying, like we're all so different, that we actually reach different people. And we reach different people in different ways. Like my first podcast I had with my co-founder, Bonner, I used to listen back. I listen back to it now and I just cringe because I was like, what in the world were we thinking? We used to laugh so much. We would just crack each other up, right? Like, and we would just spend a good, 20, 30 seconds just laughing on the podcast. And, we got like we got people who were like, yeah, you guys laugh too much. Like, you know, and I get that.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I don't know if I could listen to it. But then we did get other people who were like, it's such a joy to listen to the both of you. And so you see just the different feedback. And if you go like, there's no point in changing yourself. I mean, you can for people who are very adaptable and want to learn from data. If we had gotten significant feedback that it's like, you guys laugh too much, like stop it. If that was like the base, then it's like, okay, maybe we do have to adapt that, you know, but we were getting probably more feedback that it was like, you guys are, you know, so much fun to listen to, just, you know, you're just yourselves and stuff. And, you know, so we're not going to be for everyone, you know, we're only going to be for the people who get that, who, you know, want to have fun with us and, you know, enjoy life, you know, and things like that. And that's the thing. It's like, we all will reach people, and the people who don't like that, they'll find someone else. They'll find someone else who they can vibe with. And so I always think about that. And I always go like, each of us have such unique voices and perspectives and experiences and stories and delivery, like the way that we talk about things and the insights that we share, that honestly, like, even if you think that you have nothing quote unquote worth sharing, like you do, because you're going to be able to reach someone who just totally gets where you are, who you are, what it is that you're talking about, and you're going to be able to help them. So that's what I always go back to. Like we all have such different voices, and yours is so unique that you've got to let it out.
All right, this is what me selfishly and everyone has been waiting on. We want to talk about this 4-step strategy.
Yeah.
We talk about a 4-step strategy to drive unlimited traffic to a podcast. And I'm just interested, and hopefully everyone else is interested. Can you just break that down for us? What does that look like?
Yeah. So it's 4 steps. I would not call them small steps. And I would say that they're also not easy and quick steps. So I'm going to caveat all that, right? Because again, going back to, you've got to stick with something for 6 to 12 months. Nothing's going to work in 2 days. But this is literally, I call this the traffic pyramid. And I go back to this, like seriously, every time I'm like we're starting a new marketing campaign or whatever, like I go back to these 4 tiers of the traffic pyramid, and I, in my mind, tick them off. And I'm like, okay, are we doing this? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? So the first is like the bottom tier, is the foundation of it. And this is really about content. I call it passive organic content because this is just the act of creating content. So this could be just us recording a podcast episode, right? It's, you know, we're creating content. It could be writing a social media post and even posting it, like creating social media posts. It could just be writing and publishing a blog post, right? Like these things, we're creating content to get ourselves seen. And it's kind of the foundation, because everything that we do, and you'll see this, you know, as we go through the pyramid, like starts with the content that you're creating. And the reason why is because the content is your message, right? Like whatever you're putting out there, that ultimately is the message that you're, you know, it's your perspective, it's your expertise, right? It's all of that. So I always start there, right? Create content. The second tier then is all about activating that content, because it's one thing to create it and it's another thing to actually have it working for you. And depending on what channels you are, this could look different. So, you know, we talk about social media a lot. And social media is like just the act of pressing publish is not creating active content, unfortunately. And, you know, for example, like back in the day when I did have the podcast, and I don't know if you ever did this, Lee, but like I used to create these posts that were like, it was audiograms, right? So it'd have like a static image with the wave line, and it would just be like, episode just dropped, you know, and that's what I would push out. That's what I would publish. Like, what do you think the engagement or even the actions on that was? Like 0, right? Like
I can tell you what mine was. Yeah, 0.
0, right? And that's because, like, unfortunately, the act of publishing is not actually us making it active. Yes, there are strategies and there are ways in what it is that we're publishing that can compel people to take action. So that's, you know, that's like a different conversation. But really activating, for example, if we talk about social media, is done in a multitude of ways. One is having the right audience, i.e. going out and finding them. Depending on what, it could be either online. So, joining the right groups, following the right people, having them follow you back. But it could also be offline. Like if you go to in-person conferences and events, like how do you actually get people who you meet in person to start to follow you online? So you start to get the right people following you. That's so important if you want an engaged, active, social media presence. That's one thing. And another form of activating on social media is actually to start having conversations with people. Like, yes, that means going the DMs. And I don't mean like a cold out, like I get the whole icky, just, hey, I'm this random person who you've never heard from before. Come hire me. Like, not that. There are definitely ways to do this, the in a way that feels authentic. But, if you're looking for clients through social media, etc., like this is the active work that you have to put into making the platform work for you. So that's like social media, for example, writing blog posts, even I would say to an extent like podcasting, even though I don't always follow this, but like a lot of it can hinge on keywords, right? So how do we, do the research up front and figure out what it is that people actually are searching for, looking for, want to listen to or hear or read more about, and actually activate our content rather than doing it passively, So like it is actually putting more time into the, not just the keyword part, but especially if you're a blogger, in the schema markups, in, actually leaning into the more technical elements so that you can actually have that work for you. So it really depends on the platform. Same with YouTube, it depends on the platform that you really want to focus on. But that's why I always say that max, and I have to remind myself this as well, remind myself of this, max 2 platforms that I always try to focus on at any one time because of this tier, because of this step of having to activate the content that you're creating. It's not as easy as just pressing publish and like suddenly you're seen. You have to actually work it. So that's a second tier.
Max 2. Got you.
Max 2 is my strong advice.
I got you.
Yeah. The third tier then is what I call leveraging other people's audiences. And this one is a big one. Like I love this one because that's how I built my first business. I mentioned that I would just reach out to food bloggers, right? Like that is me leveraging their audiences. Now, the reason why I put that third, and I say that content is so foundational, is because if you're like me and you struggle with imposter syndrome and all of these things and credibility and showing credibility, a part of getting through that is through having your own content, right? That these influencers or these potential partners can look to and be like, oh, this person's legit, or this they have a real business, like they're doing real things, that's always, I know for me, that's one of the first places I go to when I look someone up. I'm like, okay, well, what are they talking about on LinkedIn or Facebook or even on Instagram, and so that's why kind of it's sort of a stacked pyramid in terms of the steps. But leveraging other people's audiences, so that could look like partnerships. It could look like, forming an affiliate army. It could just look like a ton of collaborations. Like, how is it that you can help serve other people's audiences as well? Because the more that you can do that, then the more that will come back for you in a positive way. So that's like the third step or the third tier. And then the last one is paid ads. I don't do this as much. I've done it in the past, but even now, like even with Capsho, we've grown it completely organically. We're just leveraging the first 3 tiers without even going to paid ads. But the reason why paid ads is I would put kind of as the last is because unless you have a lot of money to burn, then through the testing and iterating, we need to kind of land the messages first that work with our audience and then put money behind that. And so that's why creating the content, activating the content, even seeing how what messaging vibes with our partners, like all of that is almost like the test, the experimentation to really work out what messages we then make sense to put money behind. So those are kind of the four steps.
Okay. Wow. Content activate. So when you go and you said max two that you do and you
Mhm.
recommend. You can do whatever you want, but two makes sense to you. Show me all of these things don't sound too difficult because I'm looking, I'm looking at I'm looking at the surface,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
they show the iceberg underneath the water. Like,
yes.
what? Give me, if you can, and I know you can, if you're willing, something. Where do we find our mistakes? Where do we? You know how you try to just come up with a question? Because right now my mind is spinning. And what I'm trying to really figure out is where are the common mistakes made at? What are some of the bigger mistakes that podcasters make when trying to grow our audiences?
Mm.
We're looking at the four steps because I'm assuming within those four steps there are some mistakes that were being made, either missing a step completely, not paying attention to this. But from your perspective, from your insights, like, what is that mistake?
Yeah. So I think that definitely a big one is that, and this one gets missed a lot, is the second tier of like actually
Mm-hmm.
activating the platform. Like I think
Yeah.
I would say 99% of people don't actually do this at all, or have probably even thought about it in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Where it seems like the content itself, in and of itself, is the be all and end all. It's like, well, if the
Mm-hmm.
content doesn't work, then clearly social media or whatever insert platform doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's not. I would say that that's not the truth. I would say that the content is just a start, but it's really about going deeper, way deeper into,
Mm-hmm.
and it's even in things like, well, okay, and this is why I also say two platforms, because each platform prioritizes different things. Like for example, what works on LinkedIn doesn't necessarily work on Facebook, doesn't necessarily work on
That's a
Instagram,
great point.
right?
Great point.
Like,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, they like polls and obviously LinkedIn newsletters, and those are the types of assets that it's trying to push out.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what's going to work on Facebook. That's
Right.
not the stuff that they're pushing out. So
Yeah.
that's it's really about also going, okay, well, if I'm going to just choose two, like, how do I get really deep into really understanding what almost like the strategy is even for that platform? Like, what is it that they
Mm-hmm.
want to push out, the type of content that they're looking to push out, and then how do I lean more into that? And so that's why doing more than two, honestly, is just gets too much, because
Yeah.
you have to stay on top of this stuff. And what might have worked 6 months ago doesn't work now. And if we try to spread ourselves too thin, trying to be everywhere all at once, like, we're just gonna, you'll find that drop off happens, will happen at some point.
That is great advice, and I tell you what, just being, what is it? It's just putting myself out there. I do struggle with the activating part, and you just gave some incredible insight. Just with LinkedIn is about polls and newsletters, right? And I go through LinkedIn and I see these things. I see these newsletters, or I see these white pages, or whatever they do to get your attention. There are some, from the people that obviously they have different things, but if it's people outside of your network, then those things work. I didn't think about that. And I'll use different AI programs to kind of activate content, for me. And I put it on the different platforms. So I put the same thing on LinkedIn that I put on YouTube, that I put on Instagram.
Mm.
And understanding that there are different strategies for each one, hence to only do two, is really a aha for me. So one, I just want to say thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, that's why inside Capsho, even when we develop, so you'll see if you use it, that the content that we create for LinkedIn is different to what we create for Facebook, which is different to what we create for an Instagram. knowing that. So for example, we will create a poll for LinkedIn, and we'll create sort of like more statement style hooks for Facebook, knowing that. So that strategy is basically built into the software that we've built, because we know that platforms are different.
See, there it is. I was going to ask this question. I'm going to ask it anyway, because you may use something other than, I know we're focusing on Capsho. So mind the question and don't get me. But how can hosts, and you kind of answered it too, but how can hosts use AI powered tools like Capsho to streamline their content creation and marketing efforts? Now, obviously, Capsho, you just said a nugget right there where it makes content specifically engineered, to adhere to the strategies of these different platforms.
Yeah.
But if you're not using Capsho, like, and hopefully we all will go to Capsho and utilize it, but it's like using a computer versus writing things on paper. Like, if you're thinking about how things are going to go, what would those strategies be for using AI tools like Capsho?
What would the strategies be? Okay, so I guess it depends on the platform. Like if we're talking about a ChatGPT or something that's a little bit more generic in nature, then if you are going to go down that path, and I think that you probably have to have a pretty good understanding of what it is that you're trying to, or like what the result is and how to back solve for that result. The reason why people do use Capsho is because we've kind of done some of the hard work for you. Whereas I guess if you're just trying to prompt it yourself, you kind of need to know what you're prompting, because the output's only ever going to be good as what the input is. And so it's a little bit difficult to answer your question in generalities, but that's probably where I would start. Is you'd have to probably have a pretty good understanding of what strategy it is that you're trying to implement to get the results that you're looking for. A lot of us probably maybe don't start there, it's just literally like, I just give me a social media post. I'm assuming, I don't know. I don't use ChatGPT in that way, but if it's going to be the same thing, it's like if you just give it a general, like, it's not anchored in your strategy or your understanding of how it is that these platforms work, then you probably it's kind of garbage in, garbage out.
Got it. And you kind of mentioned something. So say I'm using Capsho. Do I need to come into Capsho with a strategy in mind? Like, how does that process work? Or do I just say, here's my content?
Yeah. So you would upload your audio or video file. So you could upload this podcast episode, for example, and basically it'll anchor in this content. And then because we've built in marketing strategies already for things like social media, for things like the structure of a blog post, for LinkedIn newsletters, I think it'll already write things in the way that, and some people as well, like, might know that actually they'll start with the structure, but then they'll start to tweak it to make it their own.
Of course.
And because it's a self-learning platform, it will actually automatically pick that up and then start to actually write future content in that way, in the way that you like to write it.
Yeah, I like that. Sounds like a no-brainer in a sense. All right, so you did your 5 years, your different businesses. You've grown multiple businesses, 6 and 7 figures. What key lessons from those experiences can apply to podcasters trying to scale our shows? That was a /our.
Yeah. I would say yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to say, like, I'm a marketing nerd. You can probably tell from like how much I like to talk about marketing. And what I've realized is that growing a podcast is very much like growing a business in terms of marketing. Like, so if you follow those 4 steps, like collaborating, like even leveraging other people's audiences, there's a reason why so many podcasters guest on other podcasts, on other podcast shows, because they want to give their podcast visibility. That's leveraging other people's audiences. So the more that you can go back to like marketing fundamentals, like you can't go wrong with that, even trying to grow a podcast. Because again, as I said, there's no silver bullet with growing a podcast. You know, it's just the same thing as there's no silver bullet with growing a business. You have to come back to these fundamentals of marketing, and that is what is going to help you succeed in growing your podcast.
I love it. Okay. All right. On the flip side, what was a major business? You said the word failure. I think it was a learning opportunity. One of the businesses you started, you said you guys failed at it. Or setback, what taught you a very valuable lesson that you carry with you today?
Gosh, every business, every day I'm learning valuable lessons.
I know.
It doesn't even have to come from failures, honestly. Well, one that's been recent, actually. I mean, being in the AI space, it's not been easy. When we launched, we were the first. We launched even before ChatGPT, et cetera, like really became mainstream. So we launched June 2022, and ChatGPT really, like, they went mass market sort of end of that year, early 2023. And then after that, there was a slew of competitors, entering the podcast space, in this AI powered content creation. And so, one of the things that I've learned very recently is that even if you might have what we call product market fit. And this applies in any kind of industry. So it's very much a term used in software, but it's also a term that, honestly, because all it's saying is you have a product, whether that's a service or a thing that you sell, and you have a market that you're trying to sell to. And is it actually fitting, right? Like, does that market actually want the thing that you're selling? And what I've been learning is that basically, like, even if you have product market fit to begin with, it's very, very, because the market changes and a lot of things change. So it's very easy. It can be very easy to lose that as well. And so it's just a constant balance of, like, how do you iterate and make slight pivots, et cetera, to keep finding that product market fit.
Got you. Okay. I like it. I'm giving you all these business now that I know you're a marketing guru and a business whiz. As a veteran, as a military veteran, me transitioning into business, I've seen firsthand how, and I've experienced it firsthand, how just mindset plays a role in success. And what mindset shifts help you to stay, what mindset shifts help you to stay resilient through challenges?
Gosh, I think a big one for me, because I'm very, like, I know my stress factors, for example, like the things that really can cause me, some anxiety. And a lot of that does come down to, like, for me personally, it's going to be like, cash flow and, like, money, money, my own money mindset. And so I had to work through a lot of that personally in order to kind of, like, and I'm still working through it, obviously, to understand that, like, the number itself isn't the be all and all, because I've been in the red more times than I can count in my businesses, right? Like, it feels that way. And so being able to kind of, like, work through those periods and have the confidence to know that you're going to get through that. That's probably, for me, what I've had to work on the most in order to build the resilience to keep going. Again, as I said, if I had known this probably, like, even before going into entrepreneurship, I don't know if I would have, because there are so many sleepless nights and, so many times when I'm like, I don't know how we're going to make payroll, for example. I don't know how we're going to pay rent. I don't know how we're going to do these things. But again, the more that you do it, the more confident you just get in knowing that, you know what, like, it's all figure outable. Like, everything's figure outable.
Figure outable. I love that. Is that actually a word?
It
sounds like it is a word. Doesn't it sound like it's a word? It's like, is that a word? Figure outable. That's going to be my word. I'm going to start saying that when we run into these challenges. Look, it's figure outable, so let's get to it.
Exactly.
I love that. All right. What are some simple but powerful tweaks podcasters can make today to increase their reach?
Oh, I mean, this is like so it's a pretty general question. So, it's hard to
Very
answer
general.
without knowing, because everyone's going to be different, right? Like there's going to be
Okay.
different gaps in, potential gaps in what it is that people are doing. But I guess first and foremost, it always comes back to the content. You've got to be creating content that people actually, and when I say people, I don't mean, it doesn't have to be like hundreds and thousands of people. Like even if it's just one person or 10 people, like does that one person or do those 10 people want the content that you're creating? Is kind of, again, finding product market fit just for your content. So I think that's probably where I would start. A lot of times, we always blame the marketing or the whatever, but if you keep going, everything you kind of almost have to reverse engineer everything to find the root cause of the problem. And a lot of times it's going to be, hey, like, is my content actually even good? People might find it and they'll start listening to it. Yeah. But if it's not good, then they're not going to come back and they're not going to tell other people either. So, so I always kind of come back to that.
Man, that even saying it, like having to approach that question personally, it made my stomach drop. Is this even good? Anyway, so that's an important question, because then you're just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. So you want to ask that question so that you can pivot sooner rather than later. We got those 2 hypothetical days that we need to pivot. So a more specific question, and maybe this is more easier for you to really hone in, but for those just starting, what's the best way to approach content marketing without feeling overwhelmed? Feels overwhelming sometimes,
Yeah, I think it's, it depends on what is probably overwhelming people. A lot of times it might be because they don't like the sound of their own voice? Is it because they're getting hung up on the tech, too much? It really kind of depends on what is, again, I go back to the root cause. Like, what is it that's actually causing people to stop? Once you can figure that out, then you just have to remove it. That's it. That's the only thing, right? Like if it's a tech thing, you remove it either by, yes, you can put the tech in and stuff, but honestly, that's not going to make a difference. You just remove it by going, actually, the tech is not that important. Just start producing content and the tech will follow, for example. If it's an editing thing, again, just remove that. Either get an editor or just publish it raw. At this point, it doesn't matter, especially when you're starting, because no one's going to listen to your, honestly, that's just being honest. No one's going to listen. And so, so if you can always just keep getting better as you grow your audience. So it really just depends on what it is that is holding people back.
All right. So I'll ask you a few questions and I hope you appreciated some of them. Yeah. I wonder if my questions were good enough. No, let me stop. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important for podcasters or just anybody in general to know?
Gosh, I feel like we've covered a lot. Those were some very, very searching questions. I would say, okay. I guess the only last thing I would add is just, if you are an entrepreneur and you're creating content and you want to amplify your message, then please give Capsho a try. That's capsho.com. We actually have 50% off our plan. So you can sign up for a 7-day free trial, try it for free. But if you like it, when you sign up, put in the code forever50 and you'll be able to get 50% off the plan for as long as you're a Capshovian, as long as you're with us. So I just wanted to make that offer.
I love it. And where can our listeners connect with you, maybe not you, but your representative, and learn a little bit more about Capsho?
Yeah. So if you want to connect with me, probably Facebook or LinkedIn are the best places. Just my full name. You can find me there. If you want to learn more about Capsho, probably our website, capsho.com is the best place to go to. And you'll be able to find ways to get to either me or one of my team members through there.
I love it. All right. So, hey, this is really an insightful conversation Deirdre shared. powerful strategies on how podcasters can break through the noise and attract unlimited traffic using AI-driven content creation. Capsho seems to have it down. Just listening to you talk about Capsho is getting me excited because I'm sitting here and, you were saying it, trying to write these damn prompts in Chat GPT, right, to give what it is that you're looking to get out of it. And garbage in, garbage out is a real thing. So let's just keep it simple. Capsho is great. But you also talked about your 4-step approach to audience growth. And I believe that's a game changer for anyone looking to build their movement and maximize their impact. Deirdre, thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your energy to Hindsight, the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me come on. And I loved your questions. I love your energy. Great conversation. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Hey, and for the listeners, if you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe to Hindsight, the podcast, and leave a review. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube for more amazing conversations like this. See you next time. Hey, and don't forget to get out there, capsho.com. Take advantage of that 50% off. Try it out. See what you like about it. Tell us what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Give some feedback, to Deirdre so she can make this powerful AI tool even better. Until next time, continue to be better. Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight, the podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight, the podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.